Shir of Wednesday. Okay, we'll begin from the 3 stars. I think they're called a dinkus in the middle of the page. 4th paragraph on the page, line 13. Duber kam upon him, many Farbrengens the Rebbe spoke already. In addition to what there is to be found annually, the same particular events, the same particular calendar events, whether it's Purim, whether it's Pesach, whether it's Yitas Kislev, whatever it is, that they are essentially identical every year, and there's the same message every year. In addition to that, Yeshnam Inyanim Yuchadim, there are unique and specific aspects, Ubemela Gam Heiros Miyuchados, and therefore specific lessons and directives, Hakshurim Im Kviyas Hashanas, connected with exactly when in the calendar it comes out. So in other words, Purim can come out a certain day of the week, Pesach can come out, etc., etc. It can come out in a certain parsha that we read. So there are things that are a common denominator that you can speak about Purim every single year, and then there are things you can speak about on Purim that have to do specifically with this year. It comes out in this parsha, it comes out in this day of the week, etc. The same thing the Rebbe is going to say now concerning the idea of Shabbos Chazon and what we have and the unique message of what was both in the year Tafshin Lamedal, when the Rebbe said this Farbrengen originally, 1974, and it's also identical to this year, where Tisha B'Av is preceded immediately by Shabbos Chazon. So he says in line 14, Valderchs have been in a similar vein in our situation. In addition to what was said previously concerning Shabbos Chazon, that's connected annually, every single year it has in common, and that was the first half of the Farbrengen, or the first Sicha of the Farbrengen that we learned on Sunday. There's a specific and special matter in the exact calendar state of this year. Shabbos Chazon, who Erev Tisha B'Av. Shabbos Chazon comes out on the eve of Tisha B'Av. And from Shabbos Chazon, we directly enter into Tisha B'Av. It comes out on a Sunday. And to preface line 17, that the day before Tisha B'Av is not just a close preparation and a close introduction to Tisha B'Av. The day before Shabbos and the day before Yom Tov is a close preparation and introduction for the day of Shabbos and Yom Tov. So the Rebbe is going to say that Erev Tisha B'Av, coming out on Shabbos, has in a way a greater connection than any other day of the calendar that comes out prior to a certain special day on the calendar. So the Rebbe says, why is that so? You say to him, even more so, Sheboy Maskal Kfar Hayinin Tisha B'Av on Shabbos, that is leading into Tisha B'Av, already begins the idea of Tisha B'Av. Like we see in the actual halacha, Minchas Shabbos, when it comes to Mincha and Shabbos, Bizman Shal Raiva Derivim, during the time that's called the will of wills in Kabbalah, very elevated time, the most highest level of Shabbos is spiritually on the afternoon of Shabbos, Mincha time of Shabbos. Ein Oimnim Tzidkoscha. There are 3 lines that we say before Aleinu, which is Tzidkoscha, and that is not recited when Erev Tisha B'Av is like on this year, comes on a Shabbos. Beglal Shabbat Tisha B'Av Einem Tachnun, because since on Tisha B'Av we do not recite Tachnun L'Fisha Nikra Moed, because Tisha B'Av is called a Yom Tov, and we know that on a Yom Tov, or any day, that we do not say Tachnun, we do not, if that coincides with a Shabbos, so then we do not recite the Tzidkoscha. So we see that already Tisha B'Av's impact is not just felt on Tisha B'Av itself, but it's even felt on Shabbos. The Yom Tov status of Tisha B'Av impacts Shabbos as well. So he says in line 21, Valpiza moving Goyd Lamayla, Shebekvi Shanazu. According to this, understood the great quality and advantage that according to the calendar of this year, She'erev Tisha B'Av, that right before Tisha B'Av, Sheboy Maskol Kvareni, the Tisha B'Av already begins, the idea of Tisha B'Av, who Shabbos Chazon is the time of Shabbos Chazon, Sheboy Marim Cholechet Misrael's Beis Hamikdash Shlishi, like we mentioned many times, and also the beginning of this Farbrengen on Sunday, that every person is shown the third Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos Chazon, and we said the whole metaphor of a child that was given a suit of clothes by his father, the king, and he tore it once, he tore it twice, the third time, the third suit of clothes, the father shows it to him from time to time so that he should know what to look forward to and what to work towards. The same thing, the third Beis Hamikdash is shown to every single Yid on Shabbos Chazon. So it says, this Shabbos Chazon is that they show every Yid the third Beis Hamikdash is more powerful and greater than any other time when Shabbos Chazon comes out on a different day of the week. Ki b'shara shonim, during other years, sheyesh hefsek shel chama yom ben Shabbos Chazon l'Tisha B'Av, when there's a separation of a few days between Shabbos Chazon and Tisha B'Av, yesh chiluki dargis, there are different levels be'ezei mida pe'eles re'iyas Beis Hamikdash shlishi b'Shabbos Chazon al Tisha B'Av. To what degree does the vision of the third Beis Hamikdash, that every Yid is shown the third Beis Hamikdash on Shabbos Chazon, since there is a separation of a few days, there are differences in to what degree will it impact and affect and influence the actual Tisha B'Av, because there is, after all, a day, 5 between them. As opposed to when Tisha B'Av comes out the way it is this year. That we enter into Tisha B'Av immediately on the heels and continuation of the Shabbos, that the person was shown the third Beis Hamikdash. L'loy have 6 man being time, without any separation of any time between the two. Then it's even more emphasized that the entire purpose of the destruction is only for the ascent of the third Beis Hamikdash, because you're going from the vision of the third Beis Hamikdash to the morning of the destruction that's supposed to bring about the building of the third Beis Hamikdash. Take from that they're shown the third Beis Hamikdash immediately when we enter Tisha B'Av. As we know, the reason why the king is showing the prince that third suit of clothes is to encourage him to change his ways, so he should earn his suit of clothes. And this vision of the third Beis Hamikdash, this acts as an assistance in the person's service, that should influence and affect that Hashem says, I will transform their mourning into rejoicing. So the Rebbe goes on to line 27, the idea behind this is, it's known, the rule, this is a klal brought down, a rule, a principle that's brought down Chassidus from philosophy books and so on. And we're going to have 2 examples soon, maybe even 2 examples of where we see that from a yesh, from one entity, when you have to go and come into another entity, in that transition, there is a middle ground. There's a place that has to be devoid completely of the first before you can go into the last. So, but there is a certain precondition that when do you need to have an ayin, nothing in the middle between one yesh and another yesh. This is only when the second yesh is something new and completely higher incomparably so to the first yesh. As opposed to when the two types of yesh are comparable one to another. I'm going to skip over to the second example just to keep it a little bit simpler. Top of page Yud Zayin, and he says, commercial mazri, for example, this is analogous to when one sows and plants. Does a person not plant a very small measure of grain, a measure known as a kav, to be able to harvest many kur, which is incomparably greater? So what are you doing over here? You want to go from a small amount to an incomparably great amount. Since this growth is incomparable to just the seed that's being planted, you want to go from the seed to a lot of kernels of wheat, let's say. There needs to be an ayin between the seed and the multiple stalks of the multiple kernels of wheat in one stalk, or the multiple fruits and seeds within those fruits on one tree, etc. What is the ayin? That's the idea of the rotting away, the complete dissolution of the seed in the ground. And when the seed completely becomes ayin in the ground, in such a way could be the growth in a way that's incomparable. Can you imagine a person that doesn't know anything about agriculture, and you tell him this seed is going to help us grow a beautiful apple tree? So he says, wow, that's amazing. And then he sees you putting it in the ground, and he realizes on the ground it gets completely spoiled. So he's going to start screaming at you. He said, what are you wasting the seed? You could have had an apple tree from it. So he said, that's the way the apple tree grows. When you want to have from this tiny little thing should become this great, big, huge apple tree with many apples, etc., you need that it should be completely dissipated, should become totally ionized. Now, the same idea is in going from the previous Beis HaMikdashes to the third Beis HaMikdash. So he says in line 4, so too concerning the Beis HaMikdash and Bayis Rishon, the first Beis HaMikdash, though it was greater than the Mishkan, they are still comparable one to another, and there wasn't truly and really a complete destruction of the Mishkan to be able to come to a state of the first Beis HaMikdash. Mash'enkin Beis HaMikdash as opposed to the third Beis HaMikdash, who be'ilu shaloi be'erech legabe HaMishkan v'HaMikdash shalafonov. The third Beis HaMikdash is incomparably higher and greater over the Mishkan and the first and second Beis HaMikdash that preceded it. That preceded the third Beis HaMikdash. V'lachein, therefore, kedei shema yesh da Mishkan v'HaMikdash shalifnei will be that from that yesh of the previous mikdashes, that they laid the groundwork. They are like the seed for the revelation of the ultimate state of yesh of the third Beis HaMikdash. It's not that it's not going to be a physical place. Shagam hu yeh binyan gashmi. Oh, so the third Beis HaMikdash will be a physical structure, as its measurements are detailed in the book of Yecheskel. They will offer physical karbanos in the third Beis HaMikdash. So why do we say it's incomparably greater than the earlier Beit HaMikdashes and the Mishkan? Rather, the physicality when Mashiach comes of that third Beis Hamikdash will be in the ultimate perfect state. Therefore, that we had this before, all the mitzvahs will be according to your will, meaning because the person that offers the karbanos and the actual physical carbon and the actual physical Beis Hamikdash will be in the utmost perfect state. All of it will come together to make a perfect carbon. So to be able to reach from the prior Beit Hamikdashes to the perfect and ultimate state, incomparably greater, of the third Beis Hamikdash, tzarich li is biyoser ayin be'emes, has to be even more so, the ayin in the middle. So klolos inyan achurban v'arichsa galus cholu. That's the general idea of the destruction of the Beit Hamikdashes, and the lengthy galus specifically, that in that our third Beis Hamikdash is different than, let's say, the second Beis Hamikdash. The second Beis Hamikdash only needed the first Beis Hamikdash to be destroyed, and a galus of only 70 years. Our galus has been, for millennia already. But Nimtza comes out, line 11. The entire idea of the destruction and the exile is only for the sake of the third Beis Hamikdash. That is the ayin that's in the middle, the nothingness and the removal of the previous thing. It's in the middle that only afterwards could be the true yesh of the third Beis Hamikdash. Just one more practical and down-to-earth example. There are situations where you could take a home and you could remodel it. In the state of the remodeling, depending what type of remodeling you're doing, you don't have to completely tear down the original home. You can keep the structure and you add touches here and there, you redesign certain parts of the house. But then there are certain situations where the new structure that you're building is so completely better and greater than the original building that you can't even keep the bare bones of the original structure. You have to totally destroy and tear down the original building and rebuild completely from scratch. So the same thing over here. The third Beis Hamikdash is built in such a incomparably higher level that it needs a complete ayin, a complete tearing down, and the lengthy golus of that preceded it. Now, that is, in general, the concept of what we are doing now. These times of golus leading into the third Beis Hamikdash. The Rebbe is going to connect it that when you're going from Shabbos Chazon into the third Beis Hamikdash, into Tisha B'Av directly, so then this idea is emphasized even more. So he says in line 13, that Tisha B'Av begins in the very time that they are showing the person the third Beis Hamikdash, or Mudgish Yaiser. This is even more emphasized, Shekala Inyan the Tisha B'Av, that the entire point of Tisha B'Av, it's only a preparation, which is the ayin be'emsa, the ayin that's in the middle of Beis Hamikdash for the third Beis Hamikdash. Therefore, you have right away, you show the person the Beis Hamikdash on this Shabbos, and then immediately you do those activities which are supposed to be the final makir patish, like it's brought down the expression that we should bring the Beis Hamikdash about. Ois test, line 15. Yes, we can add to this. That this advantage of the calendar setup, where the day before Tisha B'Av comes on Shabbos, is even greater than those years that Tisha B'Av actually comes on Shabbos. One would think that when is there, and the Rebbe in other years does emphasize it, when Tisha B'Av comes on Shabbos, that what can be greater than that? Shabbos pushed off Tisha B'Av by a day. The Rebbe says, concerning this message, what we're trying to say, the message is so much more powerful, not when Tisha B'Av itself falls on Shabbos, but rather as it is this year, that Tisha B'Av immediately follows after and comes out of Shabbos. So it says in line 17, Kasher Tisha B'Av Chal B'Shabbos, Azai Nidcha in the Tisha B'Av. When Tisha B'Av coincides with Shabbos, so then the whole idea of Tisha B'Av is pushed away. One would seemingly say there's nothing greater than it. And again, many years the Rebbe did emphasize that in those years. But as we know the Rebbe's style, whatever the particular situation is that we're in now, that's the greatest. So therefore, on the year that Tisha B'Av comes out on Shabbos, it's going to sound from the Rebbe, that's the greatest and utmost level. But now, this year, it's not that way. This year, Tisha B'Av follows Shabbos. That's the greatest thing. When Tisha B'Av coincides with Shabbos, and therefore Tisha B'Av is pushed away, what is causing the pushing away? It's coming from above. It's because Hashem made it that the calendar coincided that Tisha B'Av came out on Shabbos. It wasn't anything having to do with our doing. We didn't push Tisha B'Av off. I'm sorry, line 18. As opposed to the calendar time when this Tisha B'Av, that the day before Tisha B'Av comes out on Shabbos, so then it comes about that I transformed their mourning into rejoicing through the person's own avodah, because we're saying we are shown the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi by Hashem on the Shabbos, so that we are inspired to take the next day, which is Tisha B'Av, and transform it and stop it from being Tisha B'Av. That's one idea of the advantage of this year over even when Tisha B'Av coincides with Shabbos. Another advantage, you can say on line 20, another idea behind this is when Tisha B'Av is pushed off because it coincides with Shabbos, when will we read then the Haftarah of Chazon Yeshayahu? So then, and we said that the Haftarah of Chazon, we spoke about this on Sunday, is connected with the vision of the Beis Hamikdash itself. That's the meaning of the word Chazon, that we're shown a vision of the third Beis Hamikdash. So when is this Haftarah being read? On the actual day of the 9th day of the month of Av. We don't actually fast that day, but it's on the calendar date of the 9th of Av. As opposed to the way we do it this year, that it's read on the eve of Tisha B'Av, it's read Erev Tisha B'Av, Nasim Kvar Enyonim the Shabbos Chazon Lifnei Tisha B'Av. So the matters of Shabbos Chazon occur before Tisha B'Av, in such a manner that I will not place it upon you. Initially, I will not even place the matters and the ideas of the Tisha B'Av. In other words, the vision of that precedes Tisha B'Av is like helping us ensure that before even the calendar date of the 9th of Av comes about, we are released from it and it doesn't even happen. This is a Simcha Shir. So now the Rebbe is going to take the Simcha message and the Bitochon message from this and other aspects, as we will point out. Ois Yud, line 23. Vayram Mizeh, and the lesson from this, everything needs a lesson because actions was primary. It's a very nice speech, but what's the practical application? By prefacing, when a Yid makes a true accounting, takes a true and accurate accounting of his spiritual state and situation. Sometimes he will find himself to be in a bit of a depressed, in a gray, cloudy frame of mind. Biyodai, by knowing that he had matters involving a sin, or even he doesn't have an actual sin, or the word chet, as we've spoken about in prior occasions, from the word deficiency, that he thinks into the fact that he's lacking the perfection that he should have had in his avodah. Was from this gray, cloudy state of mind, he can come to a state where he'll feel sad and depressed. I feel liyush chas v'shalom, where he'll feel hopeless, heaven forbid. When a Yid is told, Shabbos Chazon marim lois beis hamikdash shlishi, on Shabbos Chazon, they show him the third base of Mikdash. That's the message of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak bar Ditchever with the whole analogy of the father and the son. And it's the job of the child now, the job of the Yid, to now build the base of Mikdash and to prove to our father that we are worthy of wearing the garment. Tayin, he says, since he's in the state and situation where he's at, that he knows that he's not complete the way he's supposed to be. He doesn't see the Beis Hamikdash. How does Hashem await from him that we should be able to affect, that he should be able to contribute and cause the building of the third Beis Hamikdash? So there's a few points over here. One point is, he's saying, I don't see it. Your seeing doesn't make a difference. Look at line 30, last paragraph on the page. Therefore, first and foremost, we tell a Yid, even though that he himself does not see his shayrish on neshama above sees, like the Gemara relates about certain people that were around Daniel when he had a nevuah that they trembled because their neshama above saw it. And the fact that he says that he knows what state he's in. Therefore, who am I to affect the building of the Beis Hamikdash? The truth is, it's not being done by the Yid himself. Hashem is the one that assists him. The truth is, he has concealed and innate powers. That it's very likely that he himself does not know about them. Let's skip over the parentheses to the next page. And therefore, when he's worried about him being able to do this, since you are cleaving to Hashem, your God, you are all alive today. And since he's cleaving to Hashem, moving is understood. Just like Hashem is unbounded, so the person who's connected to Hashem has this, he's tapped into Hashem's infinite power, and therefore with his avodah and his service, he can do infinite things as well. That's the idea that we say by Krishma, we have to love Hashem with all our might, that Chassidus always explains. It means without any limitations, without any boundaries. Through a person breaking out of their own boundaries, he awakens and draws down the unbounded aspect of above. That from that level comes down all the influences that's unlimited and unbounded. But there is work to be done. This isn't just handed to him on a platter. For this, there has to be toil. And if you toiled and you found, you should believe. As opposed to if you didn't toil and you still and all found, don't believe them when they say that. We say specifically a find. What are we talking about? When we're talking about a found object, that means it doesn't mean that you earn it. According to your toil, you earn, but according to the toil, you find. Just like a found object is something that's incomparable to the toil that I put in. That's something that's incomparable. The idea of finding something that I did not even expect. When I find something, I'm walking the street and all of a sudden I find something, that's something completely unexpected. It's not like something that I earned. So therefore it's completely incomparable. And therefore it's also v'kosher magula shlema. Why? Because the complete geula is also like finding a lost object completely unexpected. Kemuvim Maimer Razalek understood from what the Chazal say, shloisha boin behes chadas, 3 things come without intention, without paying attention to it, Mashiach and Metziah. Both Mashiach and a lost object, so they both have that in common. And we find a pasuk that actually associates it, like it says, Matzasi David Avdi. David, my servant, which is often in Tanakh, it goes on Mashiach, is called by the name of his forefather David. Hashem says about him, Matzasi, I have found him. In other words, it's considered like finding a lost object, completely incomparable to anything we do. So the person says, second paragraph on the page, but I know who I am. I know I'm not the way I'm supposed to be. So he says in line 7, the fact that the person has untoward things, negative things, just the opposite. That should encourage him that the entire goal and purpose of the sin, that through his avodah he should transform it to merits. Like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, what it says in the pasuk, Kol Paul Hashem Lemaneu, everything Hashem made for His sake. V'gam Rasha liyom ra, also a Rasha for a wicked day. What does that mean? That He made a Rasha for a wicked day? What's the meaning behind it? Says the Alter Rebbe and explains, Sheyashuv merishoy, that the Rasha's purpose of being in this world is that he should turn back from his wickedness. He should transform the bad that's within him, the ra'ah, into day and light. Skip the parentheses. Lamaila, it should be above the level of light, like we know, kadiskafi sitarachar v'cholu, when sitarachar becomes subjugated and sublimated, so then he becomes, he brings about a great revelation of light in all the worlds. And he said that Alter Rebbe goes on, he quotes further from the Alter Rebbe on line 12 in Mevayir, and the Alter Rebbe explains, therefore a person should not be downfallen. His heart should not feel very bad. Even if he is always battling the Yetzer Hara. For this we could ask, like the Alter Rebbe poses the question, what is the goal of the creation of the Beinim and the descent of the Neshamas to this world, is to become enclosed in the animal soul, since they're never able to kick the Nefshabamis out. For what purpose would the Neshama descend to this world? To put in toil for no reason, to, heaven forbid, to battle all their days with the Yetzer, they can't overcome it. Why did Hashem do this? So the Alter Rebbe concludes, perhaps this was a goal that he was created for. That is his service, to constantly subjugate and sublimate the Klippa. This means he finds himself in an ongoing war. Even after he's victorious in the war today, tomorrow he has an additional war. So therefore, instead of a person becoming, feeling hopeless because of it, since he realizes this is the purpose, so he has a whole different attitude. So he says in line 18, since this is the goal of his creation, of this person, there's no room for hopelessness. There's no room for sadness. Like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, the idea of sadness is completely out of the ballpark, not supposed to be considered whatsoever. Because atzvus comes from klippus noiga, not from the side of kedusha. Alter Rebbe says, if a person is sad from heavenly matters, it's from the good part of noiga, but it's still klippa. So skip over the brackets, line 22. Concerning this, it says, in every sadness there will be an addition and an increase. That's the joy that comes after the sadness. So just like because of the sadness, he's going to come to a greater joy, this is similar in reflecting what we said before, that after the ayin you come to a greater yesh. He says in line 24, just like between one yesh and another yesh, there has to be the ayin in between, the way it's in the person's avoidam, that the person may feel sad in between, or may be upset at their spiritual state in between, but that's only to reach a greater level of the Batshuva afterwards. Similar to the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash that caused that the Yidden should not be able to fulfill their mitzvahs as it's appropriate. That's the true idea of the nothingness of a Jewish person, the being in a state of that ayin. That's between the two yeshes. What's the true idea of ayin? The true idea of ayin is when he's torn away from Yiddishkeit. When a Yid is not able to study Torah and to fulfill mitzvahs out of comfort. During the Golus, we were able to manage Torah mitzvahs, but was a lot of times very uncomfortable. I'm sorry. Like we find by my father-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe, Sheveboy Kastrama, his bate b'milim charifos, sharfa oisis al kach sha'adayin leis afshaloi im hatchnoknet aingem lifo benegel lebnei mikvah k'yaitz with that. The Frierdiker Rebbe spoke in very sharp expressions about how he wasn't able to affect and cause and to bring about a building of a mikveh. That's what bothered him. That's the ayin. The ayin is that the Golus prevented him from doing this particular thing of making a mikveh. So that's the true ayin of Golus, is how it interferes and limits our Torah mitzvahs. So last paragraph on the page, Kasher Yehudi Yedeh, what a Yid knows, Shekol Ha'lam Esva Steinim Him Rak B'Chadei Sheyafchoitz Ma'idei Avodos. All the concealments and coverings are only so that the Yid should transform them through his avodah. Azai loy mispol mem. So then all those concealments are not something that he becomes affected by. Va'oisek b'avodos b'toikev, he's involved in the service in full force. Bitochon shebavadi yatzliach, and out of trust and confidence they will surely be successful. More like the words of my father-in-law. Sheish tzava soldat hoylach milchama im shir lechas marsh mitoch bitochon shinatzeach. A soldier goes out to war with a march on their lips, on their mouths, out of confidence and trust that they will be victorious. And the very confidence and trust that they have going out to war, that itself, that itself empowers and speeds up the victory. That is victorious, so play only effect will transform their sadness in the morning to rejoicing. In a revealed way until the eyes of flesh will perceive it. Like it says, and all flesh will see together that the mouth of Hashem said this. So we're going from Simcha into idea of Bitochon. And now the Rebbe is going to continue with Bitochon and also continue with a topic of Bitochon that the Rebbe spoke and we learned about also in last week's Wednesday Shir. So he says on the top of the next page, what was mentioned before in Ois Yud about the idea of Bitochon, comes in continuation to what we spoke about in earlier Farbrengens. One has to awaken and to strengthen and encourage by Yidden the idea of the trust in Hashem. Both concerning having trust and faith in Hashem, concerning spiritual matters, concerning the general idea of avodah, Shakadosh Baruch Hu Oizroi, to trust and believe that Hashem is going to assist him. Ukesipur Hamedrash Oidus Rabbi Chanina ben Doisa Shara Evan Achas, like the story about Reb Chanina ben Doisa, that he saw a rock that he wanted to donate to the Beis Hamikdash because he couldn't afford anything else. Skip the brackets to the next line. V'amar harei alai la'alois Yerushalayim. He said, I want to bring it to Yerushalayim to donate to the Beis Hamikdash. Ziman lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu chamisha malachim v'dmus bnei Adam. So Hashem made him come across 5 malachim that looked like took on human form. Amru loi. So they told Reb Chanina ben Doisa, we will bring your stone for you to Yerushalayim. As long as you will place your hand and your finger, even your small finger, with us, there has to be something on your part. Nosan Yodev placed his hand and his finger with them, and all of a sudden, in a moment, they find themselves standing in Yerushalayim. So therefore, we find that Reb Chanina ben Doisa wanted to do a mitzvah, he wanted to do something spiritual, and as long as he was willing to put a finger to it, to put a hand to it, Hashem already took care of the rest. So just like when it comes to trust and faith in the spiritual, that if I have trust and faith that Hashem will help me out in the spiritual, but I do my part, so the same thing comes about from that in a way of a Seder Ishtalshalos. Also the trust and faith concerning material matters, that Hashem will definitely take care of us in the material sense. Though Yidden in the time of exile are like one lamb among 70 wolves. Still in all, like we learned last week, Yidden have nothing what to become excited about and to fear them. Like the Medrash says, that great is the shepherd of Klal Yisrael, that's that single lamb that saves it and guards it. Behold, he will not slumber, not sleep, the guardian of Yisrael, and he breaks those attackers before the sheep, before the lamb. It's the 4th paragraph. Same language like the Rebbe used last week. We don't just tell Yidden this just to calm them down. In other words, we're telling them like bedtime stories. But it's by telling them how the matter is truly so, even more so. The very idea that we speak about how Hashem is going to save us, and the idea of speech is about revelation, like the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, and Chassidus explains, Mechazik u'moisef binyan ha-bitochon v'ashmirachul. Speaking about Bitochon and Hashem strengthens our Bitochon, and therefore strengthens the resulting guardianship that Hashem has. So it's not just enough to have it filed away. I learned Shara Bitochon, I learned the Rebbe Sichas, I learned Chassidus, I know that Hashem takes care of us. No, the Rebbe says one needs to speak about it, because speaking about it reveals it and strengthens the Bitochon and brings about that part that Hashem guards us and protects us. Line 15, he continues, Valder Shemetzinu, similar to what we find. One second, my screen disappeared. Valder Shemetzinu b'negei l'akravas karban tamid, similar to what we find concerning the offering of the karban tamid. Shehutzerchu loimer b'dibur. Where do we find the importance of speech? That concerning the karban tamid, they said, I'll say this outside, that they said when the Kohanim were ready to bring the karban tamid, so they said, Heir pnei kol ha-mizrach ad shebechevron, that the entire eastern horizon was illuminated all till Chevron. Why was it necessary to say till Chevron? So the Chazal say to remember and to recall the merit of the forefathers who are buried in Chevron. So the Rebbe says, why is it necessary for him to recall it? The Kohanim are the descendants of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But by saying it and reciting it, this strengthens and adds the revelation of the Schus Avos. And the same way that Rebbe explains this idea of davening, let's skip over that paragraph to line 20. So too we find concerning the general idea of davening. It's a positive commandment to request one's needs from Hashem. The L'chura ain't a movement, seemingly it's not understood. Why do we have to request from Hashem? When Hashem anyway sustains the entire world with His goodness, like it says, you open your hand and you satiate every life according to what they need and want. So why is there a need for us to daven? The idea behind this is saying the words of davening, which is revelation, like we said before, affects the flow that comes down from above. Either it affects the speed with which what the hashpah comes down from above, or the manner and the way it comes down the hashpah. So in the similar vein, concerning Bitochon, speaking words of Bitochon manifests it, brings it out. So too concerning Bitochon. The very speaking about Bitochon. It affects the idea of the addition and strengthening in the drawing down and the revelation of the matter. And the greater the Bitochon grows, like it's also expressed in the fact that he's speaking about it with more energy, more excitement, and more passion. The more passionate the person is when speaking about Bitochon, the more revelation it is, and the more it influences that the actual matter will take place. It says in the second paragraph from the bottom, Yud Beis, this idea that the manner in which everything comes down from above is dependent on the degree of the person's Bitochon. We find in the Parsha and the Torah dealing with the mon that came from above in the Midbar. Shezoi Parsha b'Torah. It's a Parsha in the Torah. She'ara nitzchis. Torah is a lesson. So therefore, what we learn from what we learn in Torah, it's an everlasting lesson. The last paragraph on the page that Rebbe says, Behegdim, by prefacing, Mashakos of Rabbeinu Azakim b'Shulchan Aruch, what Alter Rebbe writes in the Shulchan Aruch. After Mekat Tzad Kaim, Matayimim, Lo Yehevi B'Siduri. Though, even though the Alter Rebbe writes this minig in the Shulchan Aruch, but he doesn't actually bring it down the Siddur. So Chabad custom is we do not say Parshas Hamon every day, but the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch speaks about the advantage of saying Parshas Hamon daily. The Alter Rebbe says, quote, Toiv loimer b'chol yom Parshas Hamon. It is good to say daily the Torah portion that speaks about the month. The Tamadavar, the reason for reciting it every day, the Alter Rebbe explains in the Madura Kama Kosev, in the first version, the first edition of Shulchan Aruch, the vast majority of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch that we have is only the first edition. The second edition was destroyed and never got to us. Only the first 4 chapters of Shulchan Aruch is the second edition called the Madura Basra. So over there in the first edition, Kosev writes, why do we recite the Parshas Hamon daily before davening? Over there during Karbonos, so a person should believe that all of his sustenance comes by divine providence. That was the case by the mon. Hashem watched over and directed to give every single person exactly an omer per member of this household. Like it says, that after they came back from collecting the mon, they measured how much they got. The one that tried to add, to collect more than the omer per head, did not did not come home with more, and the one that collected less than an omer per head did not come back with less. The ilu b'madora basar, like I said, the first 4 chapters. This is in the first 4 chapters of Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. In the latter edition, in the second edition of Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he says, Kosev, he writes, Liv toyach b'Hashem noisen lechem dvar yom b'yoymoi, that the reason why we recite the mon daily is to have trust and faith in Hashem, that He gives the person's food on a daily basis what they need. Ubeprotis yoyser, and even more in detail. Kimevur b'sefer Oira Meir, like it's brought down in the sefer the Oira Meir, one of the students of the Mezritcher Maggid, skipped the parentheses to line 4. Concerning the different levels that were in the gathering of the mon. Tzadikim yarad al pesach b'seim. If a person was completely a tzaddik, the mon landed on their threshold, right by the door. Beinanim yotzav v'lotku. The Bainim had to go out and collect. Rishoim shotu v'lotku. Rishoim had to even go even further outside of the camp to collect. Then they had to grind it up with a mill, or they had to press it with the type of those type of pestles that they press with. The 3 types of people that he's referring to was not that he was a tzaddik in other parts. He's talking about 3 different levels in their trust in Hashem. Listen to this. Hainu, this means how the mon came down to a person, whether it landed on his doorstep or not, or whether he had to grind it and prepare it, or it came already ready to be eaten, was dependent upon how great was the person's trust in Hashem. Those whose trust and confidence in Hashem was in the ultimate perfect state, they received the mon ready without any toil and effort whatsoever. And those people, their trust and faith in Hashem and confidence and belief was in a lower level. They had to put in a little bit effort. And those that their Bitochon was in the lowest, most level, they had to put in lots of effort. They had to grind it in the mill, and they had to press it in the pestle. And he says in line 10, similar to the story concerning the Baal Shem Tov. That's brought down in stories, as farm stories of Polish Chassidim. Shapam overly at Bayis. Once the Baal Shem Tov passed by a home, and he knocked on the window, and he said that he needs to have something to make a living. He didn't wait for an answer. He knocked on the window, said, I need to make a living, went on. Immediately, the one who lived there came out, and he chased after the Baal Shem Tov, and he gave the Baal Shem Tov everything he needed. Afterwards, the one who lived there that gave him the money asked the Baal Shem Tov, I don't understand. Since you knocked on the window and you said you need to have the parnasa, why did you go immediately? You didn't even wait for me to come out and give it to you. So Baal Shem Tov responded, this was something that was a given by him. According to the level of Baal Shem Tov, this might not be everyone's level, but according to the level of Baal Shem Tov, it's sufficient to knock on the window to fulfill that would have said that Hashem will bless you in everything you do. His action that he had to do, all he had to do was knock on the window. They don't have to do anything more than that. This was actually what happened. After knocking on the window, even though he went on his way, the one who lived there ran after him. The Indians that kosher gam teres Baal Shem Tov. This is also connected with the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov that's also brought down in that sefer al pasuk Baruch Hagever Yiftach B'Hashem V'Hoy Hashem Miftachoi. Blessed is a person that trusts in Hashem, and Hashem is the one who he relies on. Shetoichna, that the content is, it seems to be repetitive. Yiftach b'Hashem v'hoy Hashem iftachai. Sha'kefel the v'hoy Hashem iftachai, repeating it a second time, and saying that Hashem will be the one who he has trust in. Moira al darga nailus yoser b'Bitochon. That second part of the pasuk indicates a higher level of Bitochon. Not only does he trust in Hashem, that's what it means. He trusts that whatever has to come down, the hashpah comes down specifically from Hashem. He does not rely on the vessel that he's doing to be able to bring down, let's say, the parnasa. Only the blessing of Hashem is what makes him rich. That's the first level. The Baruch HaGever Shivta Hashem, I'm going to work, but I don't rely that the work is going to bring to me the money. Hashem is going to bring me the money through the work. The second part of the pasuk, V'hoy Hashem Miftachai El Yiseirim, is even more so. Shebeteach b'Hashem, he's trusting Hashem. Shegam HaKli Yishloch Loim Al even the vessel that he needs will be sent from above. Ukemaimar, like it says, the pasuk says, Hashach al Hashem li'havacha v'hu yichal kalecha. Throw your load on Hashem, and He will sustain you. Yichal kalecha. Chassidus explains from the word keli. Beribu kelim. Hashem will give you the vessels already with which to bring down the bracha. Ois Yud Gimel, line 21. V'nois of all Bitochon shel bnei Yisrael b'Hakadosh Baruch Hu. In addition to the trust and confidence that they have in Hashem, Shagam B'zman HaGolus, even at the time of exile, in Elayon of Lishin Shem Yisrael, that Hashem will not slumber, will not sleep. Yesh Nagam Bitochon, he also has the trust and confidence. Shekol Kavonos HaGolus, the entire purpose of the exile, Eina Ela B'Shvilai Ilu Shia B'Gula, is only for the ascent and the elevation that will be by the redemption. Kasher Yehavchu Yamim Elu L'Sasmu Simcha, when these days will come transformed to rejoicing and happiness. According to all opinions, it's sufficient and more than sufficient, and it's even over the amount. Called Sadas V'Sevel HaGolus Adata, the entire oppression and load of Golus and burden of Golus up till now. We have had much more than necessary in the avoid of revealing the inner and concealed powers of a Yid. Surely it came the time it should be fulfilled, the purpose that Hashem desired to have a home down there below, like it will actually become revealed in the time of the Gula, in the building the third base of Mikdash. Over there we will do according to the mitzvahs of your will, as a preparation for this. We have to be involved in matters of Torah mitzvahs without measure and boundary. And through that we affect that Mashiach will come without measure and boundary. What does it mean without measure and boundary? You skip down to the last line after the brackets. Like kima, not that Mashiach will come little by little and there'll be little changes. Skip the parentheses. Such a manner should take from a yad yotzim ma'afela Lord God. Immediately we're going out from darkness to a great light. Through adding just one more mitzvah. Through that the Rambam says the person balances the scale for himself and the entire world to the side of merit, and he causes for him and for them a salvation, in the coming Mashiach Tzidkenu B'Karav Mamish. And here the Rebbe sang a Bitochon song, B'chabotcho Avaseinu.